welcome to the Fat Quarter Shop live stream. We have special guest Diane from Silver Creek Samplers. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Good. So why don't you start off by telling our customers, like a little bit about you, your company, and how you kind of got started. And we are going to have a trunk show in a little bit.
Okay, well, a little bit about me. Well, I have been a graphic designer since graduating high school, and I have worked for several different companies over the past 32 years. I began Silver Creek Samplers in 2009, and it was about 3 years after I had lost my job with a quilt magazine. I had spent 12 years working for a quilt magazine, doing the layout. And after that job ended, the passion just wasn't there anymore because I missed it so much. And I thought I need something else to be creative with. And I've always been doing something as a child. I was either coloring or drawing on any piece of paper I could get. So I thought to myself, well, I spent 12 years quilting and designing quilts, and so all right, maybe I could do kind of cross stitch instead. And it actually took me 3 years from 2006 to 2009 to actually contact a distributor, because it was the whole, well, I don't know if anybody else is going to be interested in these things. And I thought, well, what do I have to lose? The worst they can do is say no. So I contacted a distributor, and they picked me up right away. And I've been rolling ever since. In 2020, I was furloughed. I worked for a local, well, actually right across the state border, because I'm very close, New York and Pennsylvania. So I worked in New York State, in the southern tier. And the company I worked for sold appliances and furniture and electronics, and I worked in the marketing department. And when the pandemic began in March of 2020, I was furloughed. And of course, none of us knew what was going to happen. The whole company was furloughed initially, and then slowly they started to bring back people. And as it rolled into summer of 2020, I was thinking to myself, I just have this feeling I'm not going to be called back, because I knew that with the supply chain, they were having difficulty getting inventory. And without inventory, you kind of can't advertise.
Right.
So that kind of, it got me thinking, you know what, I think I'm at a point now with my business, I could take it full time. But after 32 years of helping to row somebody else's ship, going to being the captain of my own.
Yeah.
It was scary, but in October of 2020, I received word that I had been laid off. But oddly enough, even though I was scared, I was excited at the opportunity. I was given this opportunity to pursue my dream of taking Silver Creek Samplers full time. So, my company basically just, I didn't really have a business plan. It was just, hey, this is fun and I enjoy this, and let's just see where this takes me. It went from just being a source of pocket money, extra pocket money, to actually paying the bills, which still is like, wow, I can't believe this is actually happening.
Yeah, it's awesome. So do you want to tell everybody before the trunk show, what's your design aesthetic, or your favorite holiday or theme to design for? Because I think it's going to show through once you start the trunk show.
Okay. Well, I think one of the main things about all of my designs is there's always words in it. There's quite likely there's going to be a short little poem, a fun verse. I love words, and I love playing around with topography, and I think that probably goes back to my graphic arts background. But to me, I love words. I love stitching words, because the way that I design the letters, it just flows from letter to letter. You don't have to end off, start again, end off, start again. Favorite holidays, it's whatever holiday it is. I know some designers are able to design like ahead of time. They're designing Christmas stuff in January, February to get ready for a release in early summer. For me, it's the actual event, the actual holiday that spurs the creativity. So, a week before Christmas, I could be sitting designing a Christmas pattern, which I know isn't going to help for that immediate Christmas, but there's always going to be another Christmas.
Yeah.
So I look at it as, for once, I'm working ahead, which is very unlike me. So my aesthetic, I've always called it my style folksicle. It's a combination of kind of folky and whimsical at the same time. And of course, some of them are just quirky plays on words. Some of them are inspirational. Some are, inspired from my faith. It's just, it's wonderful because I don't put myself in a box.
Right.
I'm just open to, I like to say I just design as the spirit moves me. Oh, I lost my...
That's okay. It's going to happen.
Sorry.
That's why I have these big headphones, because I'm too afraid they're going to fall out.
I know. They just don't, earbuds have never been my friend. So yeah, that's kind of the backstory behind Silver Creek Samplers. I actually live on Silver Creek Road. I know some people have asked me, where did you come up with the name Silver Creek Samplers? And I think they're expecting some deep, well, I live on Silver Creek Road. So when I was thinking of a business name, I knew it was going to be Silver Creek Samplers.
Awesome.
And so, I picked samplers because there's always words in it. And I know there's always a big debate over, well, what makes it a sampler? Well, for me personally, I feel like if there's letters and words on it, it's a sampler.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so do you want to start the trunk show? And guys who are watching, just any questions you have, just plug them in, and I will answer. I'll have her answer all the questions after the trunk show. So any questions you have throughout the trunk show, just throw them in there for her. So do you want to start with A Sweet Memory? Is that what the one you want to start with?
Actually, I wasn't sure like how these were in order, but give me just a minute and I'll see if I can't find it. I just have them stacked here off to the side.
Yeah, you can do any order you want.
Okay, good. I'll just grab what's on top then.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one I'm going to share is crazy popular.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
This is called My Christmas List. And again, there's a ton of words, but there's a lot of really cute little vignettes. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be here. Sorry.
There you go. Right there.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so this was just a fun design. I just started thinking of all the different words that rhyme about different things about Christmas. And it just, as you can see, just continued to go on and on and on. I actually went to a retreat just before, maybe it was just before or just after I released this design. And someone was talking to me and they said, well, I want to stitch this for, I don't know if it was like their grandchildren or whatever, but they didn't share the same faith. And they said, do you think it'd be okay if I just excluded this bottom part? And I said, they were worried that I would be offended. And I said, no, absolutely not. It would still be, an adorable design about all the fun things about Christmas. I just wanted to, so often we get caught up in all these other things, the cookies and all of the other details. But that's why I wanted to end with what my personal belief is about Christmas. So this has been insanely popular. I had no idea when I released it would be as popular as it was. I know Christmas is. Every time I get an order from a shop or from my distributors, I laugh because I'm like, who doesn't have a copy of this already? So this is probably my best seller by far. So this is my Christmas list. It's not in a frame because I had to steal this frame for something that I needed for this past market. So that's why it's not in a frame. Okay. So the next one I'll go to is a fun one. This is Izzy Decaying. I think the funniest thing was when I released this at market, I think it was 2 years ago. Someone came in the room and they're looking at it and they're reading it and they're like, "So who is Izzy Decaying?" And I said, "Okay, you need to say it out loud." And then they got it. It was like, "Oh, is he decaying?" Oh, okay. So this was just a super fun. Again, I love plays on words. I love puns, and of course, the casket aged. This was actually one of the first designs that my fiance had some input on as I was designing it. He was just giving me some different ideas on what you could do, what I could do with it. So this was just a really fun one, and it's one that it kind of has a Halloween feel, but if you had your own little, bar in your home, it could just be a fun one just to hang up all the time.
Yeah, and
So
Cheryl, who works here, has stitched it, and we've shown it on live stream before. But all of the items she's stitched of yours, she's given as gifts. Because I was going to bring Cheryl's and show, and she's like, "Oh, I gave them all away."
yeah. So that's Izzy Decaying. And it's funny because as I design, it seems like every time every design I come to that I get done designing, or even as I finish stitching it, I'm like, "Oh, I really like this one." And then the next one comes along. "Oh, I really like this one." It's so hard for me to pick a favorite. This is, oh gosh, this was, I think, from 2021. Back to the Grind. Again, just a fun design. I love putting swirls in my letters. I like the flow that it gives. The antique coffee grinder, on that side. It just kind of reflects my love of antiques. And I'm actually, confession time here, I don't like coffee.
I don't either.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Welcome. We're in good company. I love the smell. I really like the smell, but I just don't like the taste. But this was just a fun one, and I thought, even though I don't like coffee, I know there's a lot of people that do like coffee. It's like a cult following almost. So Back to the Grind was a lot of fun to design, and a lot of my designs just start out as just very rough sketches. I actually have a design journal that I keep right by my computer. I always keep it close at hand. The idea was there are some things that are actually written on the pages, but usually they just end up on a scrap piece of paper put in here. But that's how a lot of my ideas, that's like the conception of a lot of my ideas. I just jot them down in here. And then again, as the spirit moves me, I just design what I feel like designing. This one, oh look, it's got Charlotte's hair on. I just told someone on social media that it's not animal hair, it's a specialty fiber.
Oh.
So this is Give Greatly. This was done in, I actually think I released it in early 21. But this was just a fun little design, and it also has been quite popular. The buttons were just, I get a lot of comments on the buttons that are on there. They were actually buttons that I had in my
stash
collection.
Yeah.
Some people ask me exactly where I got them. I think I got them at like Joann Fabrics. I got a whole bag of them, even though I only needed a couple. But the actual chart actually has snowflakes graphed in there in case you don't have access to those buttons. But it was just a fun design. It was a fun design and yet a meaningful design, because I think so often your greatness gets lost, and it's not in what you have, but it's actually in what you give. And I loved this design because as I was designing it, I said, okay, so is the rabbit sharing the carrots with the snowman, or is the snowman going to give up his carrot to the rabbit? And I feel like that's the beauty of giving. Sometimes you're not really sure who's really benefiting from it the most. So this is called Give Greatly.
I love it.
Okay. Next one I'll show you on the list. This was a fun one that I released. Was this a market release? Gosh, I can't remember. They all kind of blur into each other. But this is called Follow Your Heart. I had seen several different versions. Like some said, follow your heart, but take your brains with you. Follow your heart. But,
Okay.
a lot of times I'll see a funny saying. I always research it first to
Uh-huh.
make sure I'm not infringing on copyright. Um, but sometimes I'll take the saying and give it my own twist. And so this was, follow your heart, but take your stitching with you. And this kind of struck a chord with me because when I met my fiance almost 4 years ago, the good old dopamine was a pumping
Uh-huh.
strong, and the stitching, I was trying to stay focused on my stitching, but it was hard. It was hard for me to focus on the stitching because I was just all caught up in middle age love. So this has been quite popular, and it's a very quick stitch.
Yeah, I
I
stitched it.
actually I saw that, and I love the
Yeah.
colors that you chose too.
And it's at the framer, and it was supposed to be done like last Friday. And so I've been hoping, but they still didn't finish it because I was going to have it, but they didn't finish it in time.
Right. Well, this was one that I can't remember. The frame came in like right at the last minute. It might have been like right before a retreat I was going to do, possibly. And I mean, it was down to the 11th hour, and the frame came in. I do all my own framing. I'm definitely self-taught. I taught myself how to do the lacing on the back. I will never claim to be a professional framer, but I don't think it's too bad for someone that's self-taught. And that kind of came out of necessity when I began designing. Almost all my pieces are put in frames for the purpose of protecting my needlework from dust, because we all know that you can either dust or you could just kind of ignore it and have more time to stitch. And that's usually the route that I take. So I always feel like if I put them in frames, the stitching itself is protected. The frames might get a little dusty, but if you don't tell anybody and don't let anyone do the white glove treatment, then they don't know.
Yeah.
Oh my heavens, I lost my other earbud. I am so sorry. This is probably going to happen intermittently throughout. It doesn't matter how much I push them in, they just don't want to stay. Okay. So the next one I'm going to share is a very special one. This is getting a glare on it. There we go.
There you go.
Okay. So this is called When Life is Done. And I stitched this after the loss of my mother. She had passed away about 3 weeks before market in 2018.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure I just wasn't sure if I could emotionally be present at market. And I made the decision that, you know what, if I didn't go to market, Mom would probably kick my behind because she wanted to see me pursue my passions, my dreams. Yeah. So this was done as a memorial to my mom, and the chart includes the numbers and also an alphabet. And I have received I've received some emails, and also even on social media, where people have stitched this as a memorial to their son, to their daughter, to whoever. And I knew that there were not a lot of mourning samplers, and I know they were quite big back in Victorian days when our lifespan was a whole lot shorter. But this was one that I felt like, even though it's a mourning sampler, it still has an uplifting message, knowing that we're going to meet again at some point. So this is called When Life is Done. And there's also, I put two cardinals
Mm-hmm.
in this design, and that represents my sister and myself. I've seen one stitcher, the cardinal that is, I'm not doing, there we go, that one right there. She actually put a butterfly there in place of the cardinal. And
Oh, the
so
call
there's a
went
lot of
down.
different
So I need help.
ways
Okay,
that
hold on a
these can
second.
be.
The call disconnected. Hold on.
Oh,
Okay, Jocelyn. Sorry. Okay,
uh-oh.
so the call disconnected. So hold on a second. Okay. Okay. It's ringing.
Hello.
There you go.
Oh,
There you go. Okay, we're back.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did
That's
we?
okay.
Did,
So I
did
think
we
you,
lose?
when you hit, I think it said call disconnected. So I think you
Oh,
accidentally.
I know. All of a sudden, I'm just seeing your mouth move, and I couldn't hear you. I'm like, oh no,
Yeah.
oh no. Okay, so yes, that's When Life is Done. Um, let's see. What do we do next? Okay, let's do. This is this is called Lighting the Way. And this was actually inspired from an actual lighthouse that is in Michigan. My fiance is originally from Michigan, and one of the first times, it was the first time that he took me out to Michigan. Um, we stopped by and saw his family, and he took me to a state park out there, Tawas Point State Park, and it's like right on Lake Huron. And there was this beautiful brick uh, lighthouse, and of course the lighthouse itself was white. And I took a picture of it, and I thought, oh, that would be such a really cool element in a design. And the verse in particular is one that again, I saw something online and I was really inspired by it, and I thought, how can I make change this to make it rhyme and still have it mean the same thing? So that's part of the creative challenge for me as well. Like, oh, I love what that says, but how could I make it rhyme and still
Mm-hmm.
retain its meaning?
Mm-hmm.
So this was, even though there's a lot of solid stitching in it, it really stitches up quite
Mm-hmm.
fast, because the bricks that I put in the lighthouse, it's in the red lighthouse, um, they're not all symmetrical.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just like, oh, this is so boring.
Right.
That's what I was afraid of. I was afraid
Right.
of like losing steam.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just, it was enough to keep it interesting and enough color changes without being obnoxious. And that was one of the questions I noticed, if I just use one needle or have multiple needles threaded.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten more so that if there's a color that's used in different places, I will just keep that threaded.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I usually do just use one needle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Lighting the Way. Okay. This is actually, this is a design that the date on it is 2012. So this is one of my earlier pieces. This is called Sweet Liberty. And again, just a really fun, patriotic design. Forever will be strong and free. It just, there's a saying, I think it's attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, that women are like tea bags. The longer you put us in hot water, the stronger we get. So that was kind of the inspiration for, Forever will be strong and free. And it's just a fun patriotic design that even after, oh my gosh, this was 10 years ago. I just realized that. I did the math in my head. That it's still been quite popular. And even though, again, there is some solid stitching in it, it really stitches up rather quickly.
Yeah, and I see that in your designs, a lot of your pieces are stitched on hand-dyed fabric.
I do love the hand-dyed fabric. When I came back into the cross-stitch world, it had changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
I had done a little bit of cross-stitching back in the very early late 80s, very early 90s. And it seemed like all that was available was, 14 count cream or white Ada.
Mm-hmm.
You know, wasn't even aware that there was a cross stitch shop that was close to me. So it was just going to the big box stores and getting,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the 14 count. And then when I came back into cross stitching in the early 2000s, I found a cross stitch shop and I went in and I was like, oh my gosh, I see, wow, these are so cool, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it just gives it a totally different look. Um, when I first began designing, I was famous for going onto eBay and just buying um, lots of fabrics. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they might not even be identified as to what company did them, but
Mm-hmm.
it was just somebody was cleaning out their stash, and that was before I was, you know, I don't want to say well known enough, but to contact the actual companies and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm a designer, you know, could I get a piece of this or this for
Mm-hmm.
a design? Which is, you know, what I'm able to do now.
Yeah.
So I do love the look of the dyed fabrics. Some of them are printed. The fabric I used for lighting the way, like that was a fabric flare fabric, and it's actually printed on there.
And do you
Um,
list the name of what fabric you use on your patterns?
I do.
Okay.
That is something that early on, if it's a very early pattern, you may not find that information on
Mm-hmm.
there. I might just say it was stitched on 28 count
Right.
linen. But as I kept going and growing, as I say, I began to make sure that I write down on my working chart, okay, this is the fabric, this is the count, this is what it's called,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that stitchers, just like quilters, they want to know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you used.
Yes, yes. Because we're getting a lot of questions on what fabric was everything stitched on. So you've answered that. So we can take those questions off.
Yes.
Because I think everybody's wanting. And then somebody asked about a tea design, and you just showed one. So.
Yes, absolutely. And I do actually. There's more tea designs that I have in my idea journal.
Okay, good.
They just haven't they haven't brewed yet, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
I'm just full of bad jokes. Okay, so the next
Cracking me
one
up.
is the next one. I'm glad I'm providing entertainment. My next show is at 11. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so this is called Built on Love, and this was inspired by my upcoming wedding. Um, I I have designed several wedding style samplers that
Mm-hmm.
are very non traditional looking.
Mm-hmm.
I like to call them, um, they're part of my modern matrimony series. That's not notated on the chart, but that's what I like to call it. It's
Uh-huh.
just like modern matrimony. You know, they are suitable for any couple at any age,
Mm-hmm.
any background. And this was just a fun, cute design. There wouldn't even have to be a wedding sampler. You know, it could be great for a housewarming gift, or um, you know, the possibilities are endless. And this chart, this fabric was actually stitched on seraphim. I think it's
Uh-huh.
called stonewashed. Um, so it has just a nice faded blue background, and the chart includes the alphabet and the numbers as well, so you can personalize it according to whatever event it is that you wish to be commemorating.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love to use over dyed floss, and I did use the Weeks Dye Works is what I used to stitch the word together. Quite often, if I have a larger word, and this is a good example, I like to use the dyed floss
Mm-hmm.
because I just love the variegation, and there's enough coverage that you can actually see it and appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can really see the variegation.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that, you know, a lot of the more traditional wedding samplers, you know, you've got the hearts and the doves and the wedding bells, and you know, it's just Sometimes it's just very, it just sometimes almost feels a little too old fashioned.
Uh-huh.
And so I like to be able to come up with new ideas that would appeal to younger generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did notice before the show today when I was looking, I was like, she has a lot of wedding items.
Yeah. Well, we've been engaged now for 2 years, and he proposed in 2020, which we knew that because of the pandemic, a
Right.
wedding wasn't going to happen in 2020. And then when 2021 came along, it was like still not sure,
Mm-hmm.
what the status of everything was going to be. And then we discovered in 2022 that the date that we actually met falls on a Saturday. So we're actually getting married 4 years to the day of when we met.
Oh, wow. Well, then that was
So
meant to be.
yes, exactly. The hard part has been waiting because I'm an extremely impatient person. I think that's the funniest thing that anyone has ever said to me. If I'm stitching in public, they
Mm-hmm.
come up to me and they look over my shoulder and they say, "Can you still hear me?"
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had
yeah,
to, I
yeah.
had to push my
Yeah.
headphones in. Okay, so people will come up to me and they've said to me, "Oh, that must take a lot of patience."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, it does, but I don't have patience for a lot of things, but this I do." And I just think it's kind of funny that everyone thinks that it takes a lot of patience. And to me, it's a very relaxing thing. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a rough day, I love to be able to just sit down and just rhythmically
Mm-hmm.
make the stitches, and I feel myself just, you know, calming down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next one I'll show is this little sheep design here. This is called Fred's unifying question. Um, it's a fun take on the famous question that was asked by Fred Rogers of "Won't you be my neighbor?" My fiance is a big Fred Rogers fan, and so this design was developed. Obviously, I know that Fred Rogers wore a lot of different color sweaters, but I feel like the red sweater
Uh-huh.
was um, just so well known.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, I did use an over dyed floss and I decided to stitch it on a diagonal,
Okay.
just because it just, I don't know, it just gave it a really cool pattern. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, we all know that any kind of dyed floss, no matter which direction you stitch it in, you're going to be able to see the
Mm-hmm.
variegation of it. So that, yes, that is called Fred's unifying question, and it was the fabric is cornflower, um, and it's by Fiber on a Whim. They're probably one of my favorite companies that I use quite frequently. I love the feel of their
Mm-hmm.
fabric. It's got a nice soft hand to it, and the colors are just delicious.
Yeah, and
Um,
they have great delivery too. So
they do.
they have great delivery. So I'm happy to hear that.
Yes. And my favorite counts is 18 count Ada. I made the switch over to Ada a couple of years ago. I was um, I was struggling. I don't want to say my eyes are getting old, but
But they are. Yeah,
but
I
they
mean,
are,
yeah.
yeah, they are. And it was just, I was starting to almost feel tense when I was stitching. It was
Mm-hmm.
not relaxing. And I thought, maybe if I went back to Ada,
Mm-hmm.
which part of me was like, oh, Diane, you can't do that.
Oh,
But
you
then when I
totally
discovered,
can.
I know exactly. I discovered Fiber on a Whim at Market 2 years ago. I walked into their suite and I saw that they had 18 and 20 count Ada, and I was just like, the angels sang, the
Yeah.
heavens opened up, and I was like, oh, my world has changed.
Yes.
So that's basically 18 count Ada is what I've been using for everything, because on linen and even weave, I could only stitch 32 count. I could never go any higher count because it just was it was too stressful.
Mm-hmm.
I admire people who are like stitching over 1 on 40 count.
Oh yeah.
You know, I bow to them. You know, it amazes me how they can do that. I am not one of them, but I love how being able to stitch on the 18 and 20 counts. I love the smallness that the design
Mm-hmm.
ends up looking. It just has this cute little diminutive look.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been my go-to now for a couple of years, and I am not shamed. I will not be shamed.
Oh yeah, it's
I will
fine.
not feel shame.
I stitch on Ada, so I love
Yeah,
it.
and I've also noticed I've been able to stitch quicker
Uh-huh.
because I'm more relaxed, because I'm not going,
Mm-hmm.
oh crap, I got in the wrong, you know,
Right, always the wrong
wrong
hole.
place, or I went over 3 threads, or I don't have to
Yeah.
worry about that on Ada.
Yeah.
So this was a market release just this year. This is called A Sweet Memory, and it has a really sweet story. So my fiance and I were he was helping me redo what was my son's bedroom. My son is now 23 years old, and he's living on his own now, and his bedroom needed an overhaul. So we emptied it all out. My son actually liked to tease me. He would say, "Oh, you're just throwing away my childhood. You're just forgetting all about my childhood." And he knew, you know, he just loves to razz me. We have a really good relationship. And we took a little shelf that was hanging on the wall. We took it off the wall, and on the wall, I got teary-eyed. On the wall, I actually saw, I don't know if you can see it or not,
Mm-hmm.
a handprint. This
Mm-hmm.
quite small child-size handprint. And I saw that. And I was like, oh, that's my baby's handprint. I can't paint. We can't paint over that. You just can't. We can't. And so one of my friends said, well, just cut out the sheetrock and then just save it. So this is actually the piece of sheetrock from, and then we just patched the wall with a new piece of sheetrock. So I had this handprint, and then I came up with the words. Because, you know, as whether you have biological children or you're an aunt or whatever the situation is, you know, they always tell you how fast the kids grow up, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't ever believe them. But, you know, when that happened, it was like, oh my gosh, you know, look how small his hand was. And he's 6'5" now. So,
Oh,
sorry.
that's okay.
So this was just a really fun design. I know I keep repeating myself. That was a really fun design. Um, but it's like, it's not really a birth sampler, but yet it's
Right.
just a design to kind of pay tribute to the fact that the children that we raised were once small.
Yeah.
And they do tend to leave, they
Mm-hmm.
not only leave smudgy little handprints on walls, but, you know, they leave them on our hearts too. There's no way around that.
Yeah, I loved the story when you told me at market.
Yeah, I knew I had to take the piece of sheetrock to
Mm-hmm.
market, because, you know, it was, you know, some of my designs, they're just fun designs that they just come out of my head. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's other designs that are situational, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something that happened in my life that spurs on the design.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next one is I think hilarious. I have a lot to say. Maybe you should get popcorn. This is one of the. It was actually another designer friend had posted a whole list of things uh, on social media, funny things that kindergartners said.
Okay.
This was one of them. And I just thought it was and I immediately saw the design in my head. So I thought, all right, I don't want to do this because maybe she has intentions of
Right.
doing something. So I private messaged her and I asked her, and she's like, no, one of her friends was is a kindergarten teacher, and she just thought they were funny, and that's why she shared it.
Okay.
And she was like, so design away. So yes, this was a fun one, and the name of it is called Butter Believe It. And that name actually was a contribution from my dear fiance. We were brainstorming. I'm like, I need a name for this design. I don't want to just call it popcorn.
Right. Yeah.
But it needs to be something fun. What
Fun.
can I call it? And he came up with Butter Believe It.
Okay, so on the popcorn, is that variegated floss or is that two different yellows?
No, it is actual variegated floss. I
Okay.
think it's a Weeks Dye Works. I can't remember right off the top of my head which one it is, but I did use variegated floss for the popcorn, as well as the blue in it. I have, and then to say maybe you should get. I think I did for popcorn too. Sometimes when I do even the smaller letters, if there's enough of a variegation, I even like to use it for the smaller letters because it just adds some visual interest to it.
Yeah.
So that is Butter Believe It. Okay. Brace yourself because here's another wedding sampler. So this is called Counting on Love. And again, it's a wedding sampler, or it could be an anniversary sampler. It could just be, this couple has been together, for a long time. So it's a take on the nursery rhyme, 1, 2, buckle your shoe, 3, 4, shut the door.
Okay.
Yes. So that was kind of the inspiration for this, but I wanted it to be reflective of a relationship. So, and again, the chart does include the alphabet, the letters, so that you can personalize it, and the numbers that are up at the top as well. This one in particular, this fabric is from Fabrics by Stephanie, and it is also 18 count Aida. I believe it's called, is it Colonial Parchment? I think it might be Colonial Parchment. In the grand scheme of things, I was going to have a copy of every pattern so I could tell you exactly. But I recently started using Cosmo Floss.
Yeah, it's nice.
And yes, so their colors I find are
rich.
They're rich, and their colorways. There's a lot of the colorways that feel more complete than DMC. And I've also noticed that the feel of the floss is
silkier.
It is. It's much silkier, and it doesn't feel like it tangles and knots quite as much. So on the design, I know that I was just recently introduced to Cosmo Floss. I had never heard of it before. But I do give the DMC equivalents.
Okay.
So, if someone is unable to acquire the Cosmo Floss, then they can stitch it with DMC as well.
Okay, we're getting a lot of questions. Some people are watching on their phone and they can't read. So going forward, can you read what they all say because they can't see it on their phones?
Okay, sure. So you want me to
just start with that one, and then we can go back if we want.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so this says 1, 2, I shall love you. 3, 4, for rich or poor. 5, 6, a perfect mix. 7, 8, true soulmates. 9, 10, forever, amen.
Yeah, I had no idea that was based on that nursery rhyme. I had no idea.
Yes.
I was trying to figure out before we started, so I would kind of know. I was trying to figure out like your inspiration for some of them, but I'm clueless.
Yeah, and some of them are just out of my warped mind. Some of the more fun, quirky ones. But yeah, that's what inspired Counting on Love. Okay, so the next one I'm going to show you is, it's a little bit of an older one. This is, let me try and get it straight. Here we go. Okay, so this is called Olivia Ochre Leaf. And of course, the date on the bottom is 2017. And this was, there really was no deep inspiration behind this other than fall is probably one of my favorite times of year. I love the colors of the leaves and the crispness of the air. I don't necessarily like what follows, the cold and the snow,
Mm-hmm.
but so this says she wears a dress of scarlet red and orange leaves from overhead that sparkle with a frosty glow, soon buried in a winter snow. And God bless you if you're from a part of the United States that doesn't get snow, but we get it here in the Northeast.
Yeah.
So this was stitched with a lot of Weeks dye works, gentle art. I just felt like I needed to have that variegation that they provide. And there are, I think, at one point I was not providing DMC equivalents. I can't remember if I started with this one or not, but there are a lot of really good online
Mm-hmm.
sources. If someone, uh,
Yeah.
if you have a pattern that's calling for an over dyed and you want to
Mm-hmm.
just use DMC, there's a lot of really good resources. If you just Google, Weeks dye works to DMC or gentle art to DMC.
Yeah, and someone's asking about Cosmo, and so you can do the same thing, just do Cosmo to DMC conversion. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is, yes, that's Olivia Ochre.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see, we already did that one. Okay, so this was a market release. This is called Farmer's Blessing, and this was inspired by my grandpa's farm. It was in the family for, gosh, probably 5 generations, and he was a dairy farmer. And I spent a lot of time growing up. We would go down almost every single weekend, and it was just a beautiful place in the mountains of
Mm-hmm.
northeastern Pennsylvania. And there was probably about 95 acres, and it was just a place of just peacefulness and solitude. It was on the end of a dead end dirt road. And so this was kind of done as a tribute to my grandpa, who was a dairy farmer. And this is a fun one because, well, first of all, Charlotte, the Wonder Pup, my Wonder Beagle, she was very happy to know that the Beagle would be making an appearance. She was quite put out a couple of years ago when there were some cat designs that I had designed. She let me know her disdain for that. So I put a beagle, but also not just for Charlotte, but my grandpa had a beagle. So he also had an orange Alice Chalmers tractor that you see depicted in the sampler. But if you are an international person, you can make it red. If you're Ford, you can make it blue.
Right.
Personalize it as you wish. And there's also at the top, of course, I showed an American flag flying over the barn. Um, I realized, obviously, that there's farmers worldwide, and there probably are going to be stitchers from across the pond who want to stitch this, but not necessarily with an American flag because they're in a different country. So within the chart, I do give another option it's the same barn, but it's just a sun and some clouds
Okay.
that could take the place of the American flag, if that's what you wish. At the bottom of this is an aerial view of what was my grandpa's farm. It was taken probably back in the 60s. And this was actually the frame that belongs to my Christmas
Oh
list.
yes. Uh-huh.
This was one I had ordered the frame and it wasn't here in time for market. And I thought, well, I have to have it framed. I want it looking professional and complete. How am I going to do this? I don't have one that's that size. And this was as close as I could get. So I added the photo at the bottom of it to kind of give it a
Mm-hmm.
cohesive look.
Okay. Do you want to
And
read
this
it?
is, sure, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I forgot. Okay, it says, sorry, trying to get away from
There you
that.
go.
There we go. Okay, for the wheat and the hay and the corn, that's the corn, and the corn that is reaped, for the labors well done and a barn that is heaped, for the fresh morning dew and the warmth of the sun, I give thanks for what the Creator has done.
So
So
cool.
that is a farmer's blessing. Okay, One of the next ones was a release, I believe it was last year. This is called Founding Promises, and it's just another fun patriotic design, and it just has the word freedom, and then underneath it says equality, justice, and hope, which is based on a quote from Ronald Reagan. And that was where I got those words from. And then, of course, there's the Liberty Bell. There's a Liberty Bell that's like in the middle of the vines down at the bottom. And I believe this was all stitched, I think, with DMC on, I think that might be Hazelwood from Fiber on a Whim. It's 18 count Ada. I had a lot of fun designing the flag, and I added some different shades to give it to make the waves of the flag almost look three-dimensional.
Yeah.
So that is called Founding Promises.
And people are asking, like, is there a specific place you get your frames, or do you just...
Actually, there is, I found a website. Again, I needed to I was stitching so many of them that I couldn't possibly make them myself. Early on, I would buy frames at yard sales and thrift shops, and my dad and I would cut them down on the miter saw and put them back together.
Oh, okay.
But time just got away. I couldn't possibly keep doing that. So there's a website, a company called Custom Frame Solutions, and they have a lot of different styles of frames. And one thing that I really like too is I've learned a lot of frame lingo over the years, that you can order a different rabbet depth, which for me personally, because I'm putting glass and then they're stretched on foam core board, I need a nice thick rabbet. So I feel like their prices are very reasonable, and so Custom Frame Solutions is where I shop for my frames. Over the years, I can see that there's certain styles of frames that I've used repeatedly, but I kind of felt like, well, no one's going to see all of my samplers
together.
Well, they might at a retreat, but chances are you're not going to see all of them together. That I might reuse a certain style, but if it works, it works. Okay, so next up is Reaping Love. This, I feel, is either you love it or you hate it. When I designed this, when I got the idea, I was almost a little hesitant to release it because I thought, oh, it is a little dark. And then as I was developing the design, originally the Reaper there, he didn't have his bony little legs showing. It was just like his robe. And so as I changed it so that his bony little legs and feet were showing, and it just made me chuckle every time I saw it. And so I thought, you know what? I am going to release this. And so this actually could be, I've had people say, oh, I'm going to stitch this as my wedding sampler, and they put their initials on it. The chart does include the initials, and it just says, I love you to death. So yeah, it's an either you love it or you hate it. I think it's kind of funny myself. And this was also stitched on Fiber on a Whim. This might actually be a 20 count Ada that I used.
And so
I think it's
when you're stitching with the 18 and the 20 count, are you using one strand or two?
I am. No, on the 18 and the 20, I'm using just one strand. Which did take a little bit of me getting used to, because back when I was stitching on, say, 16 count or 32 count, I would loop my thread so that I could secure it easily when I started. And then when I started stitching on the higher count Adas, I thought, okay, I can't loop this because there's nothing to loop it with. Right. So it did take a little bit of a learning curve on my part. Okay, so that was Reaping Love. And that was a combination, I think I used a combination of Weeks Dye Works and and DMC on that one.
And the 18 count fabric that you like to use, you said your favorite was Fiber on a Whim, I think, right?
My favorite is Fiber on a Whim. I also enjoy using Fabrics by Stephanie, and Seraphim is also a really nice one that I like to use. Those are probably the three that I've used the most. Um, so this is an older design, another patriotic, and this is called Freedom Reigns. This was inspired by, again, something that came from my grandpa's farm. There was a horse barn and there was also a cow barn on the property. And the horse barn looked very, I don't want to say it looked similar, but the horse barn had a cupola on the top of the barn, like what is depicted here. And there was also a bell that was up in the cupola. And I remember as a child.
Can you move it a little the other way? Right there. Right there.
There we go. Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, good. In the cupola there was a bell, and I was told, my grandpa told me that they rang the bell after the end of World War I, after the end of World War II, and they also rang it on the bicentennial back in 1976. So this says, the bell proclaims on Liberty Hill, freedom reigns and always will. So again, just a fun patriotic design. I've seen it stitched on, this was stitched on linen, actually. This was before I crossed over into the Ada world. So this has been quite popular as well.
And when you're stitching with 18 count, what needle size do you use and what brand of needle?
Well, I use a 28 count, and what I had been using, I'm going to have to actually reconsider and find a different source, because I had been using Pat Carson's, the ones with the gold eye.
Right.
I had started, I saw them and I'm like, I don't know what all the hype is, but I'll try them. And then I tried them and I'm like, oh, I really like these. And now I can't get them anymore. So I think I have an envelope that have maybe like 10 or 15 more. So I'm using them very sparingly.
Yes.
So yes, this is called Freedom Reigns. Okay, so this one has been quite popular as well. This is called, a lot of people at market were calling it Fly By Night. The actual official title is called Flying Lesson. This was designed for a retreat in a box through Black Needle Society. They had contacted me, possibly, we had talked at maybe the first expo. The first virtual expo that we did, about the possibility of doing something, and it was going to be Halloween, and these were the guidelines. And of course, I don't like putting myself in a box. And so I said, well, I'll think about it. And I went home and was like, oh. Well, no, I was home because that was virtual. Sorry about that. I keep thinking it was a live market that we were at, that I spoke with them. But anyway, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I'll do it or not. And then they contacted me again. They emailed me. And I talked with them a little bit more and got the feeling that, well, yeah, there's guidelines, but it's not, this is just the theme, and it can be roughly this size. And I started to feel like, okay, yeah, maybe this would be fun to do. And I actually got a couple of ideas. And this was the one I did decide to release. It just says Dusk to Dawn, Fly By Night Aviation Institute, established 1692. I've been told that there's team green that stitched it using green, and then I think there's team purple that changed the green into a purple.
Okay.
Everything I've seen so far has been stitched in the green, but just a fun Halloween design, and it's actually a very quick stitch as well. And this was stitched on Hazelwood 18 count from Fiber on a Whim. And again, it was all used with, this is all DMC. I used all DMC with this.
And then
I actually,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, I started to use a lot more DMC than I did in my earlier designs, because the local cross stitch shop that was about a half an hour away from me, she retired and her business closed. So what I would do a lot of times is when I was designing, I would choose my DMC colors, but then I would go to her shop just to make sure that if I wanted to use an overdyed, that what I had in my stash wasn't, because we all know that dye lots change.
Right.
So so that's why I did start to use a lot more DMC, because I know not everyone has a local needlework shop that they are able to go to for that. And so I'm sorry, you were going to ask.
Well, do you want to explain the 1692?
Well, the 1692 is actually the date of the Salem witch trials. Yeah. And so that was why I put 1692 on there. There wasn't, it was, I wanted to put a date there, and I just felt like, well, witches have been around for a very long time. So that was why I chose 1692.
I was gonna see if you could go back and on your mom's sampler, and then some of the larger samplers, if you could read a couple of them.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Like the ones that are bigger.
Okay, let me just grab. Okay, so all right, this was one I came to first. So this was Lighting the Way, and it says, always be a lighthouse, shine your beacon bright, guide every soul adrift at sea throughout their darkest night. And then the memorial sampler, which is called When Life is Done,
and
says...
and on this one, they would like you to tell the butterfly story, why a butterfly was switched out. So that's also a question on that one.
Okay. All right, so this says, I love you just as much today as when you died and flew away. I'll not be sad nor shed a tear. Your memories will linger near. We'll meet again when life is done and soar away beyond the sun. As far as the butterfly, I don't really know why this stitcher chose to do a butterfly. I was really touched that someone was able to, she must have had a deep reason for using that. But that, that she was using this as a source of healing for her heart. And that's what a lot of the information that I've received have relayed, that it was just nice to be able to stitch this and remember my loved one, in that it just provided a peace that was needed, and it was needed for myself as well. And I know that that's just what a lot of people do go through. I said parents teach us so much, they just don't teach us how to live life once they're not here anymore. Let's see. Okay, so I know everyone has seen this probably numerous times, but I'll just go through it anyway. So it says family visits, turkey dressing, woolen sweaters, Christmas blessing, flying reindeer, mistletoe, candles glowing, hot cocoa, pies and cookies, Old Saint Nick, peace and goodwill, peppermint stick, wrapping presents, gingerbread, hang your stocking, time for bed, angels singing, Christ is born, a gift for all on Christmas morn.
So pretty.
I did have someone contact me. They wanted to stitch this, but they wanted to put their initials in there somewhere. Where could they put their initials? Well, sometimes my designs just allow space for it, and this was one that kind of left me scratching my head. So I did get creative, and I said to her, you could in between the gingerbread here, you could put your initials in between there. You could also put your initials like right underneath the manger. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it just like back stitching if you wanted to do that. And this was all using DMC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, every single floss was DMC on that one. Let's see. I think, gosh, that's everything.
Well, you have some sneak peeks.
I do have some sneak peeks. Yes, I do. So, for since let's see, when did we do the first virtual expo? The first needlework expo was done in August of.
2020.
Was it done in August or was it done in March?
It was August of 2020, I think.
We had two of them. Yeah, we had two of them in March, or we had two of them in 2020 because of the pandemic. So, um, yeah, I've totally lost my train of thought. I am so sorry. So anyway, getting back on track here, we have another virtual expo, a needlework expo, coming up at the end of this August, and for those of you who may not know, it's very much like Needlework Market, except it is done from our studios slash living rooms, just like I'm
Mm-hmm.
set up here. And then the shops can come on and they can order what they need to, which is just done virtually. So we have an expo coming up at the end of August, and I'm just going to pan through because I don't want to, I don't want to give away too much. But I do want to show you. I actually have three designs that are going to be coming up. This one is called Zip It. And there's a reason I'm not lingering too much because I don't want to give away all of the. I have a Christmas design that is called Kringle. It'll be called Kringle Flying Academy. And I will just hold up a little bit here.
It's pretty.
So there's a sneak peek of that. Very fun stitch. All of those flosses are also Cosmo with DMC equivalents. And as our wedding is approaching early in August, I had designed an official wedding sampler that actually has a really sweet story behind it. This is called A Perfect Match. And this will also be a release at Expo in the end of August. And the story is actually, the whole story is on the back of the pattern. I mean, not that it's this big, long,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to ruin it for everybody. I'll wait until they actually get the pattern and then they can read it about themselves. But there's an actual person, there's a very personal inspiration behind A Perfect Match. One of the fun things, I have always been a sole stitcher, a lone stitcher, if you will. I haven't really had a lot of, I live out in a very rural community, and I usually have stitched by myself. My sister and I, on occasion, have gotten together and stitched together. However, at the beginning of the pandemic, right after market in 2020, which we just eked in before the world exploded, my fiance said to me when we got back from market, he says, I want you to teach me how to cross stitch. I said, you want to learn? You don't want to learn how to cross stitch. He's like, no, I do. He said, if I'm going to be supportive of you, I want to understand. Right. And I said, hon, I'm not a teacher. I am so not a teacher. There's a reason I'm a graphic designer, because I can't teach. He's like, well, just show me. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, I'll show you. And in 2020, I actually shared my exhibit space with another designer, Tellin Emblem. And at the end, as we were tearing down she gave Clinton a copy of um, one of her patterns, and I can't even remember the name of it, but this is from Tell an Emblem. And there's actually more that goes around it, but Clinton decided to just stitch this part. And I just happened to have this frame in my stash. And so this was his very first stitch. I think he stitched it on 11 count Ada that I happened to have a piece. And I said to him, you know what? This is how people start.
Yes.
And so this was his very first piece. I was so pleased. Um, he was stitching on the wings of the butterfly, and he showed me one day. He was so excited to show me the progress he had made, and I looked at it and I said, "This looks really good." But I can tell you right now that the wing isn't in the right place, like because of the symmetry.
Oh, okay.
And so he got his first taste of frogging,
Uh-huh.
but he did it very graciously and restitched it. So this was his first actual stitched piece that he did. And since then, he has gone on to do some bigger projects. One that I would love to share with you is one I custom designed for him.
Oh.
Again, Clinton being a big Mr. Rogers fan, uh, during the pandemic, he's like, oh, I really would love to stitch like
Mm-hmm.
something Mr. Rogers themed.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked around online and really couldn't find too much. So I custom designed this one. Be the kind of neighbor Mr. Rogers always knew you could be. And the well-known trolley from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and the little yellow house up in the corner, a depiction of the little house that was his house in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So this is one that actually hangs in his office now. This was designed as a one of a kind gift of love. It will never be released. I've had a lot of people, I know I shared it on social media in the past, and they said, oh, you have to release it, you have to release it. And I was like, well, I would love to, because I think it has a really good message that we all need to be reminded of,
Mm-hmm.
be the kind of person that Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Rogers, be the kind of neighbor Mr. Rogers always
Right.
knew you could be. But it was designed solely as a one of a kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to like take away from that gift.
Mm-hmm.
So he took to stitching like a duck takes to water, pretty much. Another fun one that he did during the pandemic. We all remember the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. And so we found this free design online, and he decided to stitch it. I'm sure there's many who may be viewing this FlossTube that remember the days of pastel colored toilet paper. Back in the maybe late 70s, very early 80s,
Okay, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh no!
I just thought
Oh,
he made the toilet paper to be cute.
no. Okay, so I'm showing my age now. So there was a time, I was young, mind you, but you used to be able to buy pastel colored toilet paper.
They should bring
There
that
was,
back. They should bring
well,
that back.
I think they discovered that it could possibly, that whatever dyes were in it was ended up not being healthy.
Oh,
So that
okay.
was why you don't see pastel colored toilet paper anymore. But that's why he decided to stitch it in the pastel colors, because there was a time that is behind us.
Right.
Sorry. There was a time when you could buy pastel colored toilet paper. So yes, that was probably his second stitch. Um, I do actually have a frame for it, and we do plan on hanging it in the smallest room, as the English call it. Um, I know one of the questions I was looking over at, if it's okay.
Yeah.
So okay, yeah, one of the questions. Oh, sorry, allergies, nose itching. Um, asked about what my very first Silver Creek Samplers pattern was.
Yes.
Well, I actually had to go down to my, as I call it, my warehouse, which is down in the basement, and consult my totes of inventory because I couldn't remember exactly which one was the first pattern. I'll just hold up. This is the cover, and it says, "A sweet friendship refreshes the soul." And then there's a, it's based on scripture. There's a Proverbs scripture reference at the bottom. And so this is just called A Sweet Friendship.
And do you still offer it?
Yes,
okay.
I do still offer it. That is one thing that I don't do. I do not discontinue or retire patterns.
Okay, good. I did not know that. So I will order that, and we'll have that in the shop soon.
Okay. Yes, this was the very first one. I actually designed and stitched this for my pastor at the time, who was retiring. She was, it was time for her to take time for herself. And I wanted to make something special for her. And we actually did make her a quilt. It was a signature quilt, and everybody signed a block. And then just personally, I had designed and stitched this. And this was the very first pattern that I ever released, called A Sweet Friendship. I don't believe it's still available. A lot of my designs have been discontinued by one of my distributors, and I understand that they can't possibly carry every single pattern that it's ever existed. But as a shop, they can always contact me, just shoot me an email, and I'm more than happy to, provide stock of some of these older patterns.
And someone's asking, there's a moon stitch behind you, what the name of that pattern is.
Okay, that one is called Moonshine. As I can just go over and get it and show you. Pardon my backside. Okay, so this was a release at Market in, I believe it was in 2019, but it might have been 2020. Time gets away from me. So it says, "The moon said to me," let me see if I can get it here straight. "The moon said to me, do not wait to be whole, to let your light shine from the depths of your soul." This was, the inspiration for this came, I was going through a pretty dark time in my life. It was after my mom had passed away. I had gone through a divorce, and I saw a saying that kind of had the same meaning, but I wanted it to rhyme. And again, I could just envision, this girl sitting on the moon, reaching up for the star. I did choose to embellish it with, I don't do a lot of embellishing, but I found this charm in, I don't know, probably Michael's or something. And so I just wanted to add a little bit of dimension with that. Now, I did have a stitcher contact me and say, I would love to stitch this for, I believe it was a coworker, but her coworker is a he. And she said, "Can you do a boy version? Can you do a male version sitting on the moon instead?" And I said, "Well, let me see what I can come up with." And so I modified the individual sitting on the moon to be a male, and that can be found. That it's not the whole entire pattern that's on my website, but it does give the stitching for for if you wanted to stitch it for a male instead of a female. So that's called Moonshine.
And a lot of do you have specialty stitches in your charts, or is it just cross stitches?
Rarely do I have specialty stitches. I did have a couple eyelet stitches in, I think it might have been Follow Your Heart. But as a rule, they are all just whole cross stitches. I have an aversion to partial stitches. I don't like quarter stitches, or they just and of course it can be difficult especially when you're working on Ada. So, but that was one thing that when I was designing, I wanted all of my designs to be Ada friendly. So that, if you were stitching on Ada, you didn't have to worry about funky little stitches like half stitches or quarter stitches.
Are we going to get to see Charlotte the Beagle?
Charlotte, come here, babe. She just picked up her head and is like yawning, like, what do you want, Mom? Charlotte, come here.
Is she going to be shy?
Oh no, she's coming over. Come here.
Aww.
Come here. Come on up. Come on up. Come on up. Come on. She said, but Mom, you said I had to be good. Come here. You can do it. Ready? Ready?
Aww.
Ready? Ready?
Aww.
All right. There. This is Charlotte the Wonder Beagle.
She's a big beagle.
She is. She's a big beagle. She was much bigger when I adopted her. She's a rescue.
Aww.
And I adopted her back in 2019. It was kind of an unplanned adoption. I had just lost my previous, I've had beagles since I was 18 years old, a beagle. And my previous girl, her name was Molly. She was a beagle basset, and she tragically passed away. And the house was just too quiet. I had to have a dog in my life. And I saw Charlotte's picture on a local shelter Facebook page. And I said, it kind of reminded me of, you see like all these filters that people use, and they can make themselves look like they have, they just had their makeup freshly done, and they're Photoshop and make you look thinner. Well, that's kind of how I felt when I saw the picture, because I adopted her basically sight unseen. I didn't actually go see her at the shelter. I filled out the application, sent it in, they accepted it. I went down the next day to pick her up, and she came out, and she was 41 pounds. I mean, she was a chunk. And I was like, oh my, you're a chunk. I know, I'm embarrassing you, and I am so sorry. So we put her on a diet, and she's now down to a healthy 28 pounds. So yeah, I adopted her in 2019.
But I mean, I just mean she's like long, like most.
She's
really. Yeah,
she is. She's long, and she's long-legged. She's taller than any of the other beagles I've had. Am I embarrassing you? I'm so sorry. So, so yeah, she's about 7 years old now. She was about 4 when I adopted her, and Charlotte I now have to keep a latch on the refrigerator because she has figured out how to open the refrigerator. She has helped herself to in the past, a dozen and a half iced Christmas cookies out of the refrigerator. Most recently, she got into some chicken breast that we had, fortunately it was boneless. She got into some chicken breast in the refrigerator because the latch, either it wasn't latched quite all the way, or and she also in the past has figured out how to open up the broiler drawer on the bottom of my gas stove. So we have to make sure that if we use the broiler, it gets scrubbed immediately, because I know I am telling all about you. But cute. She drives me crazy. I said, if I ever did have a human female, a daughter, this is what she would be like.
She's really calm.
She is at the moment. I mean, she's been curled up sleeping. We also have a black lab puppy. But the black lab puppy is on lockdown, knowing that this was going to be taking place, this FlossTube. Because when Charlotte and Aaron, is the black lab, when they get together, there is no peace in the valley. They just roughhouse and bark and jump and run, and it's just total chaos. So Charlotte earned the privilege of staying out in the living room while we were doing this FlossTube. Huh.
Can you tell us a
Yes.
little bit about when you designed quilts? And I know you had told me you don't quilt anymore. A lot of people are asking about, do you still quilt, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. So I started working for a quilt magazine in 1993, and it was a local quilt magazine in my little hometown, Montrose, Pennsylvania, which is up in the northeastern corner of Pennsylvania. And I was the art director, and I got to do the layouts of one of the quilt magazines. And I worked there until 2006. I actually had the opportunity to publish my own quilt book back in 2003. Um, and they were, some of them were antique quilt tops that I found while we were cleaning out my grandpa's farmhouse. Some were made from scraps of vintage fabric that I found. I'm actually a fifth generation quilter.
Awesome.
And I learned how to quilt. I did not know how to quilt when I started working at the quilt magazine, which was actually kind of funny. um, as a youngin in junior high, we had to take half a year of home ec, and I remember saying, "Why do I need to know how to use a sewing machine?"
Yeah.
It's like, okay, karma. So I did not know how to quilt. I did not know the first thing about quilting when I started working in there in 1993. And then one of the editors started a weekly quilting group, quilting class at work. And our boss, of course, allowed it because she said, that's what's going to help you do your job better. If you understand how quilts are
Mm-hmm.
constructed and the process, it's going to make you better at your job.
Mm-hmm.
So for about an hour each week, we would meet in one of those small rooms and learn the basics. And I just really took to it, and that was that was my life for 12 years. Um, the tumbler quilt that's behind me, that was actually one of them that was in my book, and that was one I constructed from. Um, the white is actually flour sacks, antique flour sacks, and the other fabrics are just various vintages, probably from the anywhere from the 30s up through maybe the 50s or the 60s, that I found
Do you want to
when we were
show the
cleaning
cover
out.
you showed me?
Sure. Let me put down this Beagle Girl here. There you go. Thank you, Charlotte. So this was my book, that I had published back in 2003, Quilts from Squire Lane, and that is actually me on the cover, and the little boy is my son when he was about 3 years old. It was actually the photo was actually shot down at my grandpa's farm. The house is no longer standing. Sadly, it had to come down. There were some. It had a very old fieldstone foundation that was not. It just it was starting to cave in, and so the house no longer stands there. But the quilts that we did find down there, and the quilt tops and all of those are, I feel, are forever
Mm-hmm.
forever secure in the book that I did. Um, it was like it feels like it can't possibly have been almost 20 years ago that I did that
Yeah.
book. But there's some really fun stories in there, short little stories. There's nothing that's lengthy. It's a 32-page pattern book, and there's patterns in there for the quilts that I found and made. Um, Quilting was, like I said, I ate, breathed, and slept
Mm-hmm.
quilts. I would come home from working at the quilt magazine, and I just couldn't wait to
Mm-hmm.
hit my sewing room, which at the time my son hadn't been born yet. Um, so my sewing room was in what turned out to be his bedroom. Um, so after my son was born, my sewing room got moved to a small corner down in my basement, which is still my sewing corner, my sewing slash inventory corner. Um, yeah.
What would be your, if you had to pick like your favorite cross stitch that you've designed, what do you think you would pick?
Oh my gosh, that's like saying who's your favorite child. Of course, I can say that because I only have one child.
Yeah.
um, my most favorite one that I've designed. Oh wow, that would be such a hard one. I almost feel like I would probably say I would probably say my Christmas list is
Mm-hmm.
my absolute favorite. Just I there's a magic that happens as I'm designing
Mm-hmm.
something, and I can almost feel it inside me.
Mm-hmm.
Probably everyone's questioning my sanity right now, but I just get into such a zone when I'm
Mm-hmm.
designing, and I can just feel when there's magic happening. Sometimes I'm up until if I'm designing, I could be up until midnight, um, getting it just right. And then even then, I have a hard time going to sleep
Mm-hmm.
after because I'm almost on like a runner's high.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like to me designing. I mean, it's like it's an addiction. But it's a healthy addiction.
So do you design with the software or by hand? How do you design?
Well, it's for me it's kind of all over the map. Um, I have a lot of ideas just written down, just pencil sketches.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have an app on my phone where as I'm driving down the road, I have thought of there's a Halloween pattern which I did not. It's being stitched by a model stitcher now. That's I'm going to be releasing for Expo, and the words just came to me. And again, they're all done in
Mm-hmm.
rhyme. It's a fun Halloween pattern. And I was driving down the highway as I'm thinking about this. And I'm repeating the words over and over and over again. And I just had to finally pull off and get it
Right.
typed down in my phone so I didn't forget it. Um, I I used to do my designing in a very old drawing program, a drawing program that I actually used years ago when I worked at the Quilt magazine. However, I have recently, in the past couple of years, started designing exclusively in my counter cross stitch software. I use Max Stitch Premium,
Okay.
and so I do almost all my designing I do in there now. And I just as I'm designing, I just pick colors that I think that's what I want, and then when I'm ready to uh, actually put the final colors in, I'll get out. I have the DMC
Mm-hmm.
uh, floss card,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll pick my colors from that. So that's kind of my design process.
Do you have like a color palette you always go to, or like a certain brown you use a lot, or do you just start fresh with colors each design?
Usually I start fresh. I tend to lean more toward, I don't want to say more muted colors, but I don't tend to work in a lot of really bright colors. I like a more like a softer palette.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know back during the pandemic, one of my projects was to um, complete my DMC inventory.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out to one of the local shop, big box stores, and just they loved me because of course they had to scan
Scan
every single.
everyone. Yes.
So I knew there were colors that I added to my floss inventory that I'd look at them and go, yeah, this is never going to make the cut.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to have them because you just never know. And since I don't like putting myself in a box, I can't.
Right.
I just can't say, oh, I'll never use that color. So
And do you stitch in hand? Do you use a hoop, Q snap?
I am so glad you asked me this because I have a lot of people that have asked questions about the frame that I use.
Okay.
I think it's awesome when I see people stitch in hand. I don't know how they do it. And I am OCD enough that the idea of crumpling up my fabric oh,
Yeah.
it makes me shudder. So ever since I've been stitching, I have used, I will show you, this is my stand that I use. This part goes underneath my leg,
Okay.
and then there's a couple of joints here that can be adjusted.
Okay.
And then I just use, these are just commercially bought scroll rods. And there's a spot here on the side that I built. My dad actually helped me make
This
this uh, whatever you want to call it,
frame. Yeah.
configuration.
Yeah.
So my magnifier clamps on here, and I added a little hole here for my frogging tool and my scissors, and then I have one of these plastic clips right there
Okay.
that holds the
Yes.
chart that I can just clip on to the scroll rod.
Yes.
So I have done all my stitching using this, and I take it everywhere with me. Probably the strangest place, the funniest place that I've ever sat and stitched was in pre-op. I was scheduled to have an outpatient procedure done, and I had the IV in, and I was ready to rock and roll. And then the nurse came in and said, there's been a delay with the doctor. Do you want to reschedule? And this was shortly before, I don't remember what year, it doesn't matter, but it was shortly before Christmas. Do you want to reschedule?
Right.
Do you want to wait? And I said,
No.
no, I'm not going to reschedule. I will just sit here and wait. So I had my stitching with me. I'm, on the gurney waiting to rock and roll, and I'm carefully stitching, even though I have the IV in my hand. And it made for some fun conversation with, the nurses and everything. And they'd asked what I was working on, and I always get a chuckle because I take it with me when I go to doctor's appointments. If they're going to be a little bit longer, I have something to do. Some people will come over and they'll say, "Oh, is that needlepoint?" Well, not exactly. And I try not to go too much into detail because, for the most part, they're very polite and they just smile and nod. But I feel like it does give me a chance to promote the art, that it's not just white-haired old ladies that do this.
Right.
So,
you mentioned model stitchers, so
yes.
do you have everything stitched once or twice, or do you stitch, how do you work that with the model stitchers?
Okay, well, so I've been designing for 13 years now. And in those 13 years, I have utilized a model stitcher now twice.
Oh, okay.
Everything has been stitched by my hand. I admit I'm admittedly very OCD, but so many times as I'm stitching, I might see something in the design and go, what, I could make that a little bit better. I could design that a little bit differently. Or this color isn't working how I thought it would. So, that allows me the ability to just switch out colors, at a moment's notice. I did give in with the encouragement of my fiance, knowing that the wedding is coming up and that there was lots of planning that we needed to be doing. One of my releases for Expo, the Halloween design that I was talking about, I will tell you the name of it. It's called Mary Rodder's Spelling Lesson. So it's super fun, super cute. I did send that off to a model stitcher, and she sends me updates as she's working on it. And I fall in love with it each time she sends me an update. It's just so exciting to see this thing that just was a figment of my imagination actually come to life.
Right.
In fabric and floss.
How many hours a day do you think you get to stitch?
Well, it depends on the day. There have been days that I might not actually get out of my bathrobe until close to noon, because, which is really embarrassing, but it's also one of the perks of being self-employed. Um, so, I try and get in at least a couple of hours each day. At this moment, I don't actually have an actual Silver Creek Samplers design that I'm stitching on. Um, I have a project that it's from a magazine from, oh gosh, 1986 or something, but it kind of has the look of an antique sampler, and I've been stitching on that kind of like in between projects, if you will. So I try and get a couple of hours each day, but there's some days where, those couple of hours might not come until 4 in the afternoon, or, you know, my schedule is pretty, it's pretty flexible.
Are you like they call it like a monogamous stitcher, or do you stitch like several different things at one time?
I am a monogamous stitcher, which kind of makes me chuckle a lot, because when I was in the quilting industry, I would have a quilt that was being pieced. I would have a quilt that was being basted, and I did all my hand quilting at the time. I had some that were just in various stages of construction, and I always had a lot of different projects going at once. They didn't all see completion, but then when I started in the cross stitch industry, once I get something on my scroll rods, nothing goes on the scroll rods until that one is done.
Okay.
So I am very monogamous. And I think one of the things that helps me just stay focused is I know that I can be stitching on something, but then at the same time, maybe the next day, I can be designing. So that helps feed the, I want to start something new.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, do you do retreats? How often do you do retreats? And when you do retreats, I guess you bring all your models to look at, or?
I've done a few retreats. In the 13 years, I've probably only done,
it hung up.
Oh gosh, maybe
do I just hit that?
4 or 5 actual retreats. Oh, hello.
Okay, sorry, it hung up again.
Oh,
so
my
sorry.
phone. Oh, that's okay. So yeah, in the 13 years I've been designing, I've probably only done a handful of retreats. But when I did, the first retreat I ever did was in Myrtle Beach, and it was in 2015. And I was invited with some other designers to kind of have a vendor, to have vendor booths available. And I basically at that point took every single model that I had, because that was like the first time I had been able to expose myself, if you will.
Right.
And because no one they'd only seen them in print. They had never seen them in person. So I did that retreat for a couple of years. And then I did a couple other retreats that I maybe wasn't able to take every single pattern I had because of the space limitations where we were setting up. But I try and take as many of my newer models within the past few years, and then some of the golden oldies. I do like to take those as well. I like doing retreats because I think it's important for stitchers to know that, yeah, we're the designers, but we're just like they are.
Right.
I mean, we may come up with the ideas and execute the printing of the patterns and all of that, but I like to meet stitchers and see their excitement when they might be stitching a Silver Creek Samplers design. It's just fun to be able to make that personal contact.
Do you have like I don't even know how to ask this, but like a bucket list that you want to design? Is there's like something in your mind that you really want to do and you just haven't figured out how to do it yet? Like some really big design or something?
Well, I none of them. It's kind of funny because all of my designs, it seems like they end up being very close to similar sizes, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that is, but it just seems to be my MO.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know when I first started, I would have some pieces that were really large,
Mm-hmm.
and then some that were much smaller. Like a Sweet Friendship was, quite small. Um, but there's so many designs that I have in my idea journal, and sometimes they end up looking completely different from what I envisioned. When I first came up with the pencil sketch for Follow Your Heart, what it ended up being was nothing like the pencil sketch. And I think that's one of the things that I love about designing and being able to create on my own
Mm-hmm.
timeline, if you will.
Right.
um, is I don't wake up one morning and I'm told, okay, you need to design something Christmas, or
Mm-hmm.
you need to do this. It's just whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I may have to wait a year before I can release if it's a seasonal. Although I'm also finding that stitchers
Yeah.
stitch Christmas and Halloween whenever
All
they want
year.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many designs do you think you release a year?
The past in 2020, I think at the 2020 market, I believe I only had like 3 new releases. Of course, at that point, I was still working full time in
Mm-hmm.
addition to
Mm-hmm.
designing. But since I've been given the gift of spreading my wings and designing full time, last year I believe I released 12 um, throughout the course of the year. I do tend to just release for market,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course expo is 6 months later.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I feel like that gives me a chance to have a good, well-rounded selection of new designs, and not that there's anything wrong with releasing one or two, but because those two events are um, they're so big in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and people they just know that, okay, this is happening and there's going to be new stuff coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier for me to just plan on focusing the releases for those.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if I have one that I'm just like super excited to release and it's ready to rock and roll and it's in between those time frames, I'll still release it.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely feel like the exposure that I can get by releasing them during expo and market, that can't be beat, because people just get really excited about those two
Yeah, they
events.
do. They get
Yeah,
excited and they make their lists.
right.
Yeah, and I think the first time I met you was this year at this
I
market.
think
I think
so.
so.
I
Yeah.
think so. And it's always so exciting to meet the shop owners like face to face.
Uh-huh.
I remember one of the first times you placed an order with me, and it was probably for my Christmas list.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
remembered looking at this email going, you want how many copies of this? I don't even know who you are. Like, where did you come from? Is this for real, or is this a scam? Really? And then so I looked you up and I'm like, wow, they've got this awesome empire going here. This is amazing.
Well,
And it was just so
yeah,
exciting.
everyone was wanting it because Priscilla was stitching it, and they were like they wanted the thread pack, and they wanted to stitch it exactly in Priscilla's colors, and we got so many questions on that. And I mean, it's still selling, and they're still, still. I mean, it's just sometimes they just. I don't know. I think quilting and cross stitch, the big difference is cross stitch patterns still sell. With quilting, I feel like they sell when they're new and then they stop. Unless it's like some magnificent pattern like a swoon or
Right,
just,
right,
and I feel like cross stitch patterns really have such a longer life. And it's so interesting to me
right.
how the industries are totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I find too, I think it's really cool when I see businesses such as Fat Quarter Shop, that they offer both, because there is I think there's a huge crossover. Like
Mm-hmm.
so often there will be people, maybe, okay, I don't really quilt anymore, but I did at
Mm-hmm.
one point. And the two just, they just intermingle so much, you know,
Mm-hmm.
by so much, so many of the same people. Um, and it does, that's one of the big reasons I don't discontinue any of my patterns, because I feel like there are always
Right.
new people coming in, new stitchers, younger stitchers, stitchers who haven't stitched in 30
Yeah.
years, and they haven't seen some of this stuff. It wasn't too long ago that I had someone, probably through social media, leave a comment about, I just discovered your designs.
Yep.
And I was like, really? I've been doing it for 13 years. Where have you been? Well,
Yeah.
that could be the case, you know, that they're just coming back, or they just hadn't heard of me before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always exciting,
And
to.
yeah, and any of my customers who have been putting comments on patterns you want me to carry of hers, I've been writing them down, and I will place an order. And then after the video, any of her patterns you want me to carry, if you just type them out, I'll do one big order at one time, because I know there's like people want Holy Moses and then curly locks.
I actually, I have Holy Moses hanging here in my living room. I'd be more than happy
Oh
to
yeah,
show it
yeah,
if
yeah. I
you would
would like
like
to
to
see
see
it.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. This was, oh, pardon the close up there. Sorry. Okay, so this was one of my early releases. It has the date 2009, so it was right at the beginning of my of starting Silver Creek Samplers, and the inspiration for this actually came from the design, and they sinned. I remember, and I can't even remember the name of the designer who did that, but it was this huge,
Mm-hmm.
huge piece. And I knew I would never stitch it personally because there was some over one.
Oh,
And,
yeah. I'm out
you
on
know,
that.
and
I'm out.
oh, I just,
Yeah.
but here's the funny thing is, so I designed this piece and I ended up stitching it over one, but it's on I think it's a 25 count Lugana.
Okay.
So what I did was I put all these different vignettes. Sorry, I got a train
Right there.
here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so at the top part has a depiction of Moses up on the mountain. High up on the mountainside, Moses heard a voice of God. And then the next vignette, he's in the sea, parting the sea. Holy Moses split the sea so the Israelites could go free. And then there's the whole list of the 10 Commandments, and it's all done in rhyme. Right. Have thou. Sorry, I gotta get this where it's seeable here. Have thou. I am having a very difficult time,
So,
and I am so sorry.
Whichever way you go, when you're looking at the screen, go the opposite way.
All right, so I need to go
Right there.
this way.
Yep.
All right. So, have thou no other gods but me, before no idols bend thy knee. Take not the name of God in vain, nor dare the Sabbath day profane. Honor thy father and mother too. Take heed that thou no murder do. Resist all words and deeds unclean, nor steal, though thou art poor and mean. Speak not a willful lie, or love it. What is thy neighbor's do not covet. And then there are depictions through here. I think it's for only maybe 7 of the 10 plagues. There were some that just were not easily designed.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Moses in the basket down on the river. So as I was designing this, I kept thinking of different things from key moments in the life of Moses that I wanted to add. And this originally started out just as being the 10 Commandments. That's all it started out being. And I just kept adding more things to it, and it kept growing and growing and growing. And so that was really why I called it Holy Moses, because it was so big. I mean, it's about Moses, but it ended up being so big.
Mm-hmm.
And the frame was one that my dad and I custom built this for Holy Moses. I actually, one of the retreats that I went to, it was just it was a fun weekend retreat out in Ohio back in 2014. And there was a woman that had stitched Holy Moses, but she stitched hers over 2 on possibly 32 count. So it obviously was much bigger
Mm-hmm.
than mine. And it was so, I mean, it just took my breath away to see it in that
Mm-hmm.
size. So we had big Moses and little Moses side by side. Um, so yeah, this is one that there again. There's a lot of wording, but it really stitches up rather quickly. But I chose to stitch it over one because I knew I would not have any wall space large enough if I
Mm-hmm.
stitched it any
Yeah.
bigger than that.
Do you have anything? I know you showed some sneak peeks, but like, what can people look forward to in the future from Silver Creek Samplers?
um, well, let's see what is coming up. Um, I was inspired through, sadly, some of the tragic events, the shootings that
Mm-hmm.
have been happening. There was one up in Buffalo,
Mm-hmm.
involving a community of color,
Mm-hmm.
and it just broke my heart to hear about the hate.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one I designed. It's basically inspiring all of us to cast out the hate. So that one will be. It's designed. It's not stitched,
Okay.
um, but that is one that I want to release um, in the coming year.
Right.
Maybe I'll say. Um, I have, gosh, there's so many. I think all in all total, just this year since January, I've probably designed about between 12 and 15 different designs. There are going to be some more fun modern matrimony designs
Okay.
coming up. I'm trying to space them out, like only releasing
Mm-hmm.
like one for market, one for expo.
Right.
I don't want people thinking that that's all I'm going to do from now on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do have some more of those coming up, and let's face it, people are always getting married, so there's
Right.
always and having anniversaries.
Right.
Um, so there's so many that I can't even begin to remember what all of them are. Um, but they're all one of my goals when I started Silver Creek Samplers. Um, I was looking at designs from at the time, designers that I really admired,
Uh-huh.
and what did I like? Why am I drawn to
Mm-hmm.
these? What is it about this designer that I really like?
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me that, well, they have a look.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just look at the pattern and without even looking at
Right.
their logo, you just know, oh, that's by so and so.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted that. That was my goal
Right.
for Silver Creek Samplers. And of course, when you're first starting out, you're not really sure what your identity. At least
Mm-hmm.
that's how it was for
Right.
me. I just kept trying to find my niche, trying to find my look, and um, it kind of evolved into what it is now, and it continues to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I started out, I wanted every single design to have a rhyme in it. It
Mm-hmm.
had to rhyme, it had to rhyme. And then, like back to the grind. Well, no, that doesn't rhyme, but it's just a fun design.
Right.
Um, and there's some others that are going to be coming up that aren't necessarily done in rhyme, but the lettering is
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, in my humble opinion, unmistakable. I
Yeah.
feel like I've been able to achieve that.
Do you think
Um,
you'll ever do an alphabet pattern with, or you know what I mean, like upper and lower case of your font? I mean, it'd be like the Diane font.
I never thought about that. And I think when I started designing, like I was really inspired by like the antique samplers.
Mm-hmm.
I just really liked them. And then I thought, well, but you need something that's unique, that's uniquely your own.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if I would ever do an alphabet type sampler or not. And my lettering, it changes. It
Yeah.
changes with each individual
Mm-hmm.
design. It depends, you know, there might be like an upper
Yeah.
curlicue on a B, and on another B there might not.
Mm-hmm.
It just, a lot of it depends on like the flow of the lettering and the
Mm-hmm.
placement of the lettering and everything. And those curly cues came about because I some of the letters, when you put them side by side, there's wonky spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and that just, again, kind of messed with my OCD. Like,
Right.
no, I want them, you know. And so I
Yes.
started playing around with raising some letters higher and
Mm-hmm.
some letters lower, which of course that's what I think lends to its kind of folksicle feeling.
Yeah. That's
So
awesome.
yeah.
Do you have any like tips for new cross stitchers?
Oh gosh, tips for new cross stitchers. If you can count, you can stitch.
That would be a
um,
cute chart. That would be a cute chart.
if you can count, you can stitch. When my sister did not have any interest in counted cross stitch, and I respected that. And you know, I just kept telling her, I'm like, well, you know, if you can count, you can stitch. Really, not that difficult. Um, so she tried it, she liked it, and she's still stitching to this day. So I don't know. Don't be afraid of a pattern just because it might have a lot of different colors.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid if it has a lot of wording. You know, you might find, like some of my designs, that it actually stitches up really
It
quick.
does.
Don't worry about what the back of your sampler looks like. No one's gonna see the back.
Yeah.
That would be my biggest thing. Don't worry about if there's some stitches that don't lay quite as nice as some others.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most important thing is to enjoy the process, and know that more than likely 100 years from now, somebody's going to be looking at this the same way that we look at these antique
Mm-hmm.
samplers. So
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining me today. But since you're such a like positive, motivational person, I just wanted to end with I want my customers to comment and let me know any patterns you want of Diane's that we don't have, what your favorite thing you saw today was. But I wanted to let you end the show by giving a motivational message to customers about anything you would like to.
oh gosh, I think the most important thing is to just keep your mind and your heart open, because you just never know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that there's so many ways to make a difference in this world. Um, I've been told, by someone very dear to me, that what I do is actually a ministry of sorts. That through my love of designing,
Mm-hmm.
and my passion, and the way that I see the world, that I'm sharing the words of hope and inspiration, and sometimes just a fun
Mm-hmm.
message that is needed.
Mm-hmm.
Laughter is always needed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's humbling for me. It's humbling to realize that there are so many stitchers out there that admire the work that comes from not just from my brain and my computer, but from my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm truly humbled by that I am blessed to be able to follow this passion of
Mm-hmm.
designing and share it with others.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome. And I think that it's awesome, like, they get your dark humor too. So it's
yeah,
like, I mean, there's a dark humor there too that's just so
there
funny.
there is.
Yeah.
There is. And sometimes I'm afraid to show that,
Mm-hmm.
and then I realize, but that's part of who I am.
Yeah.
I feel like the humor, yeah, it's a little dark at times, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to hide that part, because there may be, and there have been people who have stitched Reaping Love that are just like, I just love this pattern. This is so much fun, you
Yeah.
know, and that's what it's all about, is having fun.
Yeah.
You know, I think too often we take ourselves way too seriously.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a great week. I can't wait to see you next year at Needlework Market. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Well, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Yes, awesome.